They say war teaches you to expect the unexpected. But nothing in deployment prepared me for the betrayal waiting at home. I returned from 8 months overseas to find my life erased, my house gone, sold by the HOA while I was thousands of miles away serving the country that my name is Cole Tanner, Sergeant Major in the U.S. Army. I left Pine Haven, my quiet suburban neighborhood, with full confidence everything was in order. My bills were prepaid, my grass trimmed, my property locked tight. But when I got back, I didn't go home. I went to a temporary rental arranged by the base. That's where I saw it, a letter taped to the door in a cheap plastic sleeve, with the seal of Pine Haven Homeowners Association stamped on top. I remember every word. The property located at 4411 Cypress Lane has been sold via auction for non-compliance with community bylaws. Auction. Non-compliance. My heart stopped. They sold my home. I thought it had to be a mistake. I drove to my house immediately. But it wasn't mine anymore. A different car sat in the driveway. A new family lived inside. A kid's bike leaned against the porch where I used to sit after long runs. I stood there like a ghost in my own life, watching strangers live in what used to be my world. The woman who answered the door looked confused when I said my name. "We bought it fair and square," she said. "From the HOA. No apology. No sympathy. Just cold reality." The HOA had levied fines while I was deployed, for things like overgrown grass, a supposedly unapproved mailbox, and an abandoned motorcycle that had been locked inside my garage the whole time. I had left a power of attorney with a legal proxy, but the HOA never contacted them. They never reached out to my emergency contact listed with the community either. Instead, they sent violation notices to my mailbox, knowing I wasn't there to receive them. Then, they held a closed-door meeting and voted to sell my home to cover the fines. My house, paid for with 2 decades of sacrifice, gone in a matter of weeks. That I went to the HOA office the next morning. I didn't go in angry. I wanted answers. But the woman in charge, Martha Kincaid, didn't flinch. She sat behind her desk like a judge handing down a sentence. "You violated multiple bylaws," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "We followed procedure. Military status doesn't exempt you." I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. Procedure? They never even tried to call. They never asked if I was alive. "You knew I was deployed," I said, my voice steady. "You knew I couldn't respond." She shrugged. "You should have made better arrangements." I walked out feeling like I had been robbed by my own neighborhood. And it wasn't just the house. It was what it represented: stability, safety, the reward for a life lived under fire. I contacted a lawyer, hoping this nightmare could be reversed. But the law wasn't on my side. Technically, the board had followed the letter of the HOA's bylaws. The sale was legal. And the people who bought the house? Innocent purchasers, protected under property law. The betrayal cut deeper with every phone call. When I tried to contact the local news, they didn't care. "HOA disputes happen all the time," one reporter told me. "Yours isn't special." I contacted military legal aid, but even they admitted the fight would be long and uphill. I sat in silence that night, staring at a copy of the deed I no longer owned. But something inside me refused to let this go. They might have had the law, the bylaws, and the board, but I had something stronger. A network. A family. A brotherhood built on loyalty, not red tape. That I made one phone call. Then another. Within days, messages poured in. From veterans, active duty friends, old commanders. They all asked the same thing: "What do you need us to do?" That's when the idea sparked. I didn't need to win the legal fight. I needed to win the war they didn't see coming. Not with lawyers, but with leverage. If Pine Haven's board wanted to play games with power, they were about to face people who knew how to take it back. The HOA thought they could bully one man behind closed doors. But they didn't realize I'd spent years leading missions where failure wasn't an option. They didn't understand what it meant to wrong someone who spent his life defending freedom. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The more I dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just incompetence. It was calculated. The Pine Haven HOA wasn't a community organization. It was a power structure, run like a private club by a handful of self-appointed gatekeepers. At the center was Martha Kincaid. On paper, she was the board president. In reality, she ran the neighborhood like a feudal landlord, using the bylaws as weapons and the board as her personal enforcers. They didn't just fine people, they controlled them, punished them, made examples of anyone who didn't conform to their vision of suburban perfection. That I tracked down a few other homeowners who had similar run-ins. One man was fined for planting the wrong color of flowers. Another woman was forced to repaint her entire house after being threatened with daily penalties. But none of them lost their homes. That line had only been crossed with me. And I knew why. I wasn't there to defend myself. I had no voice at the table. I was an easy target. No pushback. No resistance. Just a soldier thousands of miles away, presumed powerless. They thought they could sweep me aside and move on, but they underestimated how far I was willing to go to get justice. I contacted Ray Morrison, an old friend from the Army. He'd spent years in JAG and knew the legal terrain better than anyone. When I laid out what happened, he didn't blink. They screwed up, he said. Big time. The Service Members Civil Relief Act is clear. You can't take civil action against deployed personnel without court approval. They didn't get it. That's a violation of federal law. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and strategy. Ray filed formal complaints with the DOJ and State Attorney General's office. At the same time, I started gathering every shred of evidence I could: emails, board meeting minutes, violation notices. What we uncovered painted an ugly picture. They had ignored protocol, skipped proper channels, even laughed in internal emails about how long it would take me to realize what happened. They knew they were wrong. They just didn't think anyone could touch them, but legal battles take time. And the board was still in control. That's when we pivoted. If the courtroom was slow, we'd take the fight to the court of public opinion. I posted my story online. No theatrics. Just the truth. A deployed soldier returns to find his house sold by HOA bureaucrats. Within hours, the post exploded. Veterans, military families, and everyday Americans shared it thousands of times. Hashtag started trending. Local reporters who once ignored me suddenly wanted interviews. The public outrage was immediate and fierce. People didn't just sympathize, they were furious. Messages poured in from all over the country. Offers to donate. Offers to protest. Offers to help however they could. The pressure shifted fast. The HOA board, once so smug and secure, started scrambling. Their inboxes flooded. Protesters showed up at their office. Sponsors pulled funding from community events. And then came the leak. Someone inside the board, an anonymous whistleblower, sent me a batch of internal emails. They confirmed everything. The board had discussed my deployment. They knew I was unreachable. They even debated whether to wait until I returned, but ultimately chose to move ahead because they believed, in Martha's words, "We've done it before and no one's challenged us." That one sentence changed everything. Ray helped me turn those emails over to federal investigators. Now it wasn't just a civil matter. It was an active federal inquiry. HOA members who once hid behind policy were now facing potential charges. The board began to fracture. 2 members resigned. Another fled the state. Martha, though, remained defiant, claiming it was all a smear campaign, but the damage was done. The public pressure, combined with the legal heat, forced the HOA into a corner. A town hall was called, the first open one in years, and for the first time, the board couldn't hide behind private meetings and closed doors. Residents showed up in droves. Many had no idea how bad things had gotten. When I stood up to speak, I didn't ask for sympathy. I demanded accountability. And I got it. The crowd turned on the board. Votes were called. Petitions signed. By the end of the night, the community voted to suspend the current HOA leadership pending legal review. Control of the neighborhood shifted. A temporary council was appointed, and I was nominated to chair it. Not out of pity, but out of trust. They saw in me what the board never did, someone who wouldn't fold under pressure, but I wasn't done. Getting rid of the board was step one. Reclaiming my house was next. And I knew exactly how to make that happen. Taking down the board was only the beginning. The house, my house, still belonged to strangers. Legally purchased, yes. But under false pretenses, through a process infected by deliberate negligence and outright fraud. I couldn't undo the auction with anger or sympathy. I needed leverage. Something undeniable. So I went back to the Service Members Civil Relief Act and dug deeper with Ray. Turns out, not only had the HOA failed to notify the court before taking civil action, they'd outright violated federal protections. That made the sale itself contestable. Ray filed suit in federal court, citing procedural abuse, malicious intent, and failure to honor military protections. It wasn't just a case against the HOA, it was a direct challenge to the legitimacy of the sale. And for the buyers? That meant uncertainty. Title insurance complications. Legal freezes. Court-ordered holds. Their ownership status became murky overnight. They didn't like it. I don't blame them. They bought what they thought was a clean property. But when they realized the legal storm they were in, they reached out. At first, they were defensive. Then cautious. Eventually, they were just tired. We didn't sign up for a lawsuit, the husband said. We just wanted a place to raise our kids. I didn't want their life destroyed. I just wanted mine back. Ray stepped in again and negotiated a deal. I would drop the litigation if they agreed to a reversal of sale and a public acknowledgement that they bought the property under misinformation. They'd be refunded the full amount plus moving assistance, funded through an emergency HOA liability pool we uncovered during audit. Within 2 weeks, we signed papers. The title transferred back to me. My house, mine again, but what I walked into wasn't the home I remembered. The floors were scratched. The walls repainted in gaudy colors. My military awards and personal belongings were gone. Stored somewhere in a cold facility without care. The neighborhood I once trusted now watched me with mixed eyes, some supportive, others resentful. Not everyone liked the new order. Some thought I'd overstepped. Others feared what else would come to light that I didn't waste time on their opinions. I focused on fixing what I could control. The temporary HOA council, which I now chaired, began reviewing every policy. We stripped power from the president's role. Introduced mandatory third-party audits. Established a direct channel for deployed service members and out-of-town residents. Violations could no longer be issued without photographic evidence and multiple attempts at contact. Every homeowner now had a voice, and that voice couldn't be ignored or silenced behind closed doors. People started speaking up. A retired couple admitted they had paid thousands in fines for petty violations they didn't even know they'd committed. A single mother revealed she had nearly lost her home over a misfiled notice about a fence height. The more we listened, the more corruption surfaced. Fines that had never been accounted for. Letters never sent. Meetings never recorded. The old board had built an empire on silence. We dismantled it brick by brick. Still, Martha refused to back down. She launched a counter-campaign to discredit me, accusing me of intimidation, claiming the legal process was a setup. But her noise had lost its weight. Once the DOJ investigation wrapped up, the findings were conclusive: violations of federal law, deliberate targeting of a deployed service member, and misuse of community funds. Charges were filed. Martha was removed permanently from any future HOA involvement and faced financial penalties. The community turned cold to her. Her power vanished overnight. Even then, I didn't celebrate. There was nothing joyful about reclaiming what should have never been taken. I didn't want revenge. I wanted balance. A system that served its people, not controlled them. That's what we built. We turned a corrupted HOA into a functional, transparent, accountable body. People stopped fearing letters in their mailbox. They started attending meetings. They volunteered. They contributed. The culture shifted that my house is still recovering. The foundation is the same, but it carries new weight now. It's no longer just a home. It's a reminder that freedom isn't just fought for overseas. It's defended in quiet places, in neighborhoods, in boardrooms, and at kitchen tables. I don't walk past my porch and think about what I lost. I think about what I refused to surrender. They tried to silence me through red tape and bureaucracy. But they forgot who they were dealing with. I wasn't some absentee homeowner. I was a soldier. A leader. Someone who doesn't back down when the mission gets hard. And this mission? It's far from over. Because now, I make sure no one else in this community ever gets blindsided the way I did.